asks, how can we Liberal Democrats, alarmed by the electoral rise of right-wing populism, what can we do to combat it, apart from wringing our hands? Is it a leadership, communication, or a policy gap, David asks?
Well, I think it's all of those, but I think it's also a delivery issue. And in my own podcast, which Murray kindly referred to earlier, Defending Democracy, one of those, and they're all available. People can find them on their podcast app. In one of them, I chatted with Theresa May, former UK Prime Minister and a long time, actually university friend of mine. But Theresa made, in response to pretty much that question, she made the point that democracies have got to do a better job at delivering, and if you have a parliamentary democracy of the kind we, are used to and like, and, there is, dreadful economic inequality, people can't afford to buy a house, the healthcare system only works for the rich, the education system doesn't work for the, for working people. If it's not working, then you open the way for a mountebank like a Trump to come in and say, only I can fix it, the strong man, so-called, and people who feel so democracy, we've got to make sure democracy works and delivers. And so I think, one thing that, and this applies to both the left and the right, if you allow your agenda to be driven by media, particularly that entertainment media that makes its money out of riling people up, and you spend your time focusing on culture war issues, you overlook the basics, you leave yourself open to a wannabe strongman. So I think the answer to David's question is agree with everything the points he raised, except apart from wringing your hands. That's wring your hands if you like, but that's not going to do any good. But, advocacy, leadership, persuasion, but you've also got to deliver the goods.
Yeah, accepted. Rosalind Noonan, the former Chief Human Rights Commissioner in New Zealand, asks Malcolm whether you'd care to comment on the conflicts in Myanmar and Afghanistan and the two raging wars involving external actors too, Ukraine and Palestine, Israel. Any reflections from them as an Australian leader?
I mean, they're all very different. They're all very different, and they're all terrible, tragic, and the global community's got to do everything it can to bring them to an end. I mean, in a sense, the biggest of them in terms of troops, and resources is the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And in a sense, that is the one that is most readily resolved. I mean, that was a completely unforced invasion of a sovereign country by another, in the Palestine, Israel, Gaza dimension, I mean, there's that overworked term, the cycle of violence, but you don't have to get into an argument about excusing or justifying one side. Obviously Israel, in terms of the terrible attack that Hamas made on Israel, the Israeli state had to respond. There's no, I mean, every country's obligation is to defend its own citizens. And if you attack a country, particularly in the way that Hamas did, they were inciting and inviting the invasion of Gaza that followed. I mean, you may have seen there was a statement by all the former Australian PMs except for Paul Keating, which made that point, that this was, what has happened in Gaza, what is the terrible costs that have been imposed on the Gazan population, was Hamas's intention. In the same, it was the inevitable consequence of what they did. This is what they were seeking to provoke. But the fundamental problem there is there has to be, the only solution that can work is a two-state solution, because otherwise you're just going to have this thing happening again and again. And this is the point Lloyd Austin has made, that the Israeli Defence Force has got to recognise that in their efforts to pursue a tactical victory, they could be laying the groundwork for a strategic defeat. And unfortunately, the politics in both certainly with Hamas and in, much of the Palestinian, point of view, and you can understand why that's the case, and ditto extreme views among the Israeli side that are not reconciled to that. But what is the alternative? You can't just have a model that says where each side's model is one of constant war until one side is annihilated. Well, that's a catastrophe. You talked about Afghanistan. Well, that again, perhaps just leave that for a moment, but terrible, tragic outcome there that it is. But I think in Myanmar, the politics there are, and the animosities, the ethnic rivalries and animosities are so intense. It's tragic. I remember, anyway, I've had many discussions with, leaders from Myanmar, and including the former Prime Minister, and there are issues there that I think, from our perspective in New Zealand and Australia, I just don't know. I don't know whether we've got enough insight to really understand them, but it's hard to see what a solution is, other than saying to people, you've got to, learn to live with each other. And one of the things I often reflect on, Helen, which I'm really interested what your thoughts would be on this, is, we live in an era where human technology is more advanced than it's ever been, and you could say human knowledge is more advanced, tech is more advanced, medicine, everything's more advanced. But it does seem to me that we are less tolerant of each other and less respectful of each other and less able to live with people of different races and backgrounds than we were in the past. If you look at the Middle East, there are so many parts of the Middle East and, great communities that used to be polyglot, used to be multi-ethnic, multi-religious. If you look at the, great, even cities like Istanbul or Constantinople, Beirut, Alexandria, all through that part of the world, it was much more diverse than it is today, and the animosities seem to be so much greater. And you can make that point in a lot of other parts of the world. So why is it that we, communities that used to live, sometimes uneasily, but more often than not peacefully, side by side, are no longer able to do so?
Well, think, for example, of Sarajevo, which was, really the intersection of three faiths, the Orthodox, Muslim, and Catholics, and how that blew up spectacularly. And again, often it is, it's populism applied to identity politics, and looking for what divides people rather than what unites them, which is a sad reflection.